Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it an alien saucer? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine on that one. But what we do know is that this little mystery is part of a painting so intricate, so packed with detail and hidden meaning, it feels like Holbein painted an entire historical scavenger hunt. Today we're diving into The Ambassadors by Hans Holbein the Younger, a painting that has more symbolism than a Shakespearean love letter. But first, who are these guys with all this fancy stuff? Why do they look so serious? And what on earth is that giant distorted skull doing in the middle of it all? Let's start with the man who commissioned this painting, Jean de Dinteville, the French ambassador to London. If he looks like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, well, you're not wrong. Poor Jean wasn't exactly having the time of his life in rainy old England. At 29 years old, he was one of those moody, mysterious types, and he even had his age engraved on his dagger, just in case anyone forgot he was in his prime. That dagger isn't just for show. It's also decorated with a beautiful gold tassel, which Holbein, always one for the details, actually created with real gold leaf. Fancy, huh? So, why was our man Jean in London? In 1533, Europe was a hot mess. King Henry VIII of England, yes, that Henry, wanted to dump his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry Anne Boleyn. The Pope, however, wasn't having it. So Henry decided, fine, I'll start my own church with, marriage annulments and blackjack. And thus began the split with Rome. Enter Jean de Dinteville, sent by Francis I, the King of France, to try and calm things down, like a medieval marriage counsellor without any real say in the matter. Jean was sent to represent France's interests, which mostly involved not letting England throw the Catholic Church into complete chaos. But here's the twist. Jean hated every second of his stay. He was sick, the weather was abysmal, and he missed his cosy chateau back in Policy. He even wrote home saying, "I am and have been very weary and wearisome. I am the most melancholy, weary, and wearisome ambassador in the world." Man, he was really feeling himself. Maybe he should have started a medieval blog, Diplomat in Distress. One of the first things he did upon arrival was import 30 tons of Gascon wine. That's right, 30 tons. Clearly, Jean had figured out the best way to cope with life in England. He probably drank his way through Anne Boleyn's coronation too, which he attended in this fluffy, fur-lined outfit. A whole look, but probably a whole lot of his paycheck too, which, let's be honest, probably didn't help his mood. Now let's talk about his friend, George de Selve, the Bishop of Lavaux. George was only 25, so he wasn't old enough to wear the official bishop robes just yet, but his robe game was strong. A deep purplish-brown silk number lined with fur. Very understated, very sophisticated, but trust me, not cheap. George didn't come to England just for fashion advice. He was there to deliver some more messages from Francis I to Henry VIII, most likely to express how stressed out everyone was by the tension between the Catholics and the up-and-coming Lutherans, not to mention the whole Henry-Pope feud. George was concerned about the religious divisions and the possible breakup of the Catholic Church, a situation as delicate as, say, a lute string. Oh, we'll get to that broken lute string in a bit, but first, look at the confident expressions of these two gentlemen. Actually, scratch that. George kind of looks like he's midway through a Renaissance migraine, and Jean just looks like he's wondering why the wine hasn't kicked in yet. Now look between our two brooding buddies, and you'll notice a table covered with items that seem, well, randomly scattered. But with Holbein, nothing's random. This two-tiered table is like a Renaissance Amazon cart full of symbolic treasures. On the top shelf, we've got items related to the heavens, a celestial globe, a sundial, and a few scientific instruments used for telling time and location. Some of these are actually slightly off. Holbein was really leaning into the chaos in Europe theme here. It's as if even time itself can't figure out what's happening. The bottom shelf represents the earthly realm. Look closely, and you'll see a globe showing an upside-down Europe, with Paris and policy clearly marked. A fun detail for Jean, who was understandably proud of his property back home. There's an arithmetic book open to a page about division, a subtle nod to the religious divisions of the time. We've also got a Lutheran hymn book open to some hymns you could actually play if you could read music straight off the painting. One hymn is about the Holy Spirit and grace, maybe a plea for unity between religious factions. Another is Martin Luther's version of the Ten Commandments, one of the few things Catholics and Lutherans agreed on. Oh, and let's not forget the lute. Look closely, and you'll notice one of the strings is broken. A lovely instrument that just can't play as beautifully as it once did. Could this represent the broken unity of the church? Or maybe it's a hint at Jean's broken spirit after a few too many cold, rainy days in London. Let's talk about the elephant, or rather the anamorphic skull, in the room. For centuries, people had no clue what this weird shape was. In the 19th century, one National Gallery curator took a guess and said he thought it was a cuttlefish bone. Close, but nope. This skull is anamorphic, meaning it's distorted unless you view it from just the right angle. From the far right of the painting, looking down, it finally pops into shape. So what's the point of this hidden skull? This is what's called a memento mori, a reminder that even the fanciest, most intellectual people with the coolest clothes have to face death. Think of it as the Renaissance equivalent of posting YOLO on Instagram. And why would two guys who clearly care a lot about their looks, status, and extremely expensive outfits want death looming over their big portrait? Well, in Renaissance Europe, death was more present than we can imagine. Plagues and diseases struck unexpectedly, wiping out entire communities. People wanted to make sure they were ready when their time came, and that meant being right with God. For Christians, there was comfort in the idea of salvation and eternity. In fact, a small silver crucifix is hidden behind the green curtain on the left, symbolizing this hope. So, why did Jean de Dinteville commission a double portrait with his pal George? Some say he wanted a solo portrait at first, but then got excited about George's visit and asked Holbein to include him too. Holbein likely painted it while both men were still in London, and there's a clue: the cylindrical sundial on the table, which appears to point to April 11th or August 15th. April 11th was Good Friday in 1533, and George was in London around that time, so it may well have been a nod to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. As for Holbein himself, he worked fast, but with incredible detail. The rug on the table, for instance, is painted with thick dabs to create texture, and the curtain was done with a flat pattern that he later added folds to. And sure, George's expression might be a little stiff, but Holbein probably had only so much time to capture his likeness before he left town. Let's cut him some slack. So here we are, centuries later, still piecing together this magnificent, mind-bending masterpiece. The intricate symbolism, the lavish detail, and yes, that weird, warped skull make the Ambassadors a work of art that captures the time's turbulence and Holbein's genius. Holbein created something so intricate, so layered, that even as we try to explain it, it feels like it's slipping through our fingers like sand in an hourglass. What do you think? Was Holbein just flexing his painting skills, or was he crafting a deeper message about life, death, and the absurdity of earthly power? Either way, I think Jean and George would agree. Sometimes, a little reminder of life's bigger picture, whether it's a golden tassel or a giant floating skull, is exactly what we need.